You smile, I want you smile. I love you smile, I love you smile. Why don't you smile? We've been thinking about some positive changes. We need some positive changes. Thinking about some positive.
And now today's host, Imam Ezekiel Pasha.
Welcome to the Thinker Radio and TV magazine. I'm your host, Imam Ezekiel Pasha, and we're joined today with Professor Majid Mannan, also a professor of music and known as the Satchmo Mannan, who actually has performed all over the world and has been recognized for his ability to deliver that great voice of Satchmo. And so he's joining us, but he also is a man very educated and dedicated to the good works of the development of humanity. He's a graduate of several universities, including Columbia Universities, and hold several doctor's degrees. He's also a lawyer, spent time in the legal industry, defending a lot of important cases, actually. So he has a great history, and he's a student of history. So we have him with us today to talk a little bit about history and the things that are going on in the world today, including our country, America. We believe that you will reap a great benefit from hearing from him. So welcome, Dr. Mannan, to The Thinker.
Well, it's a great pleasure, Brother Imam Pasha, to be on The Thinker. It's a wonderful, wonderful show that makes us ponder and think about the important problems in human life.
Oh, praise be to God. I'd like to just get started to ask, what is your take on the Supreme Court nominee that President Biden has put forth, a woman who, from what I understand, has a great long history as a judge, as a lawyer, and etc. And from what we hear, seem to be well qualified. Some would say more qualified than some of the current Supreme Court justices that we have. But it seems that there's some kind of political wrangling, and we can't get around it, but it seems to deal with more of her natural origin as a descendant of Africans in America, more than her jurisprudence, I would say, her actual work and what have you. So what's your thoughts on that, being a person who's been many years as a trial lawyer, also as it's not pro bono when they make you volunteer to take up cases.
Oh, it's pro bono.
Yeah, what I'm saying.
Legal aid, public service, public interest law.
Yeah, right, because that was another issue there that I heard them bring up. Well, she has to do it because they signed her case. She's got to defend no matter what the situation is, and seeing they try to use it against her. But what's your take?
Well, you know, she's spectacularly qualified, and there's no doubt about that. You look at her credentials, you look at her judicial temperament, but there are political qualifications that her opponents think she doesn't meet. She doesn't meet the political qualifications of the right, which is basically, the right has always been the party of Adam Smith, that capital and the protection of capital and wealth, the wealth class was the most important thing in our society. That they should never be overtaxed, that the money trickles down from the wealthy to the poor. That's called supply side economics, and that's been the mantra of the country. And the other side is what Thomas Paine, the great liberator in American history, he called it common sense, the input of the common people. So you have this idea of wealth building and wealth protection That's always been a part of what should happen with the Supreme Court. And another code name for that was states' rights, where the states could have rights over the economy. So, in terms of the balance of power in the Supreme Court, those who subscribe to that philosophy of Adam Smith, his book, The Wealth of Nations, which came out in 1776, don't want anybody on there that's going to highlight the rights of the 10 amendments to the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, the right of freedom, the right to congregate, and anyone that's going to take away from the wealth citadel of this country, which included slavery, utilizing other people's money, other people's land, and other people's labor for free. That's the triangle. That's the triangle they're trying to protect. That's an area that we could use other people's money to become wealthy and control things, use other people's labor, cheap labor, and control the real estate in the land. So through those glasses, they're looking at this candidate, at what they call her political qualifications, and not her judicial temperament and knowledge of the law. And a Supreme Court justice has to be supposed to be a balanced individual who's only looking at the law and applying the law to the facts in each case and seeing whether the Constitution is being upheld. So the Constitution has these two voices. It has the voice of disenfranchisement when it talks about the 3/5 compromise, that Native Americans and people of African descent were not fully citizens, were not fully men under the idea that all men were created equal. So that's still in the Constitution.
Sure.
That's still there. And so the people who are saying African Americans are not fully men, and not fully people, and not fully humans. They won't say it out loud, but as far as having rights in society, they're classified as the other. And so therefore she represents, in their mind, the other, and not the American.
I hear you. Well, I mean, that gives some weight to their questioning of her, the little bit that I had the opportunity to listen to, even one where they asked her about her religion and so forth and so on, which she expounded. She gave a quote of something in the Constitution that said that's not a prerequisite for sitting on the Supreme Court, and she just dealt with it that way. I'm sure others, but she could have followed up and say, so why are you asking this question?
Yes.
And did you ask this of others? Because now if I was a judge sitting in over a case that this was brought, then I would waver against you for utilizing the religion of a person as a yardstick of guilty or not, or innocent, etc. I'm sure she couldn't do all that, but that was what was said, and it makes clear what you just said in terms of the historical perspective of America, in terms of the rich having the total influence over the masses, and want to make sure, even though the Constitution and all these things have the languages that says fair and equal and just and all of those things, they still ingrain in there in the people they put in place to making sure that go along with that language, but here's the real deal. Don't do anything that's going to upset the balance of power of keeping it in the rich and influential people's hands. So that's
correct. That's exactly right. That's well said.
Yeah, shame. But so let's move on to the next one here, and looking at the situation of the current war that is taking place in Europe, with Europeans against Europeans. I'm sure people will say, well, this one's Russian and this one's Polish, this one's whatever in terms of that. But for the world picture, it's Europe. And matter of fact, when I hear them talk about it, they refer back to that war with Germany and the rest of them, that all Europeans in terms of that. But I'm trying to see the connection between what happened prior to these things in terms of Africa, and even the circumstances in Myanmar, the circumstances in with the Uyghur Muslims in China. Is there any connections to not paying attention to the things in Sudan and all of these other things that were coming up, and if they had been addressed or dealt with in a fair manner by the global community, would there be this one?
Well, yes. First of all, we have to understand the role that Africa plays in European history. From the 15th century on, when the Moors were thrown out of Spain after being there 800 years and sent back to Africa or Christianized, Europe went on a spree of taking other people's lands from them and taking those resources and enslaving people to get those resources out of the lands, so-called New World. So what happens in Europe was that there was competition for these lands between France, England, Spain, Portugal, and Netherlands. And eventually, Africa came on the table after they had taken the North and South America and brought Africans there. Africa was on the table again and created a split in Europe because Africa was a source of resources for the industrial movement. And so the
You say sources. What was those sources?
resources, things like rubber and things like that,
okay.
and other gold, silver, diamonds, these things. So there was going to be a world war about Africa, and there was a conference in Germany in 1881, 1882. It was called the Berlin Conference. And at that conference was France, England, Spain, Portugal, the Netherlands, Belgium, the United States, and Italy, and Germany. I forgot one. And so they said, Jim, we're not going to fight over Africa. Here's a map. We're going to divide it up. The French, you're going to get Guinea and Senegal. You English are going to get Nigeria and Ghana. You Italians are going to get Ethiopia. You Portuguese are going to get Angola. They divided the map up to prevent a world war. But Germany was only got Uganda and Swaziland, which were landlocked, and they were dissatisfied. The United States was unhappy too. And because the United States, you already got Liberia, you're the new kid on the block, we're not going to give you anything. So the United States was upset. So the United States declares war against Spain to get back at them, to take the Philippines and Puerto Rico and things like that. But Germany seized under what they saw as being oppressed by the others. So World War I was their attempt to strike back and right the ship in terms of not getting what they should out of Africa. So Europe was divided into 2 points at that time, something called the Triple Alliance, which was Germany, the Ottoman Muslim Empire, and Italy. And the other side was the Allies, England, France, and then eventually the United States in 1917. And since that time, there's been a war in Europe called World War I, and then after the war there was a balance of power because one side lost, and the Muslim lands were divided among the French and the British. So this kept on, the journey lost, and then so Hitler comes along and tries to get back the empire that Germany had lost, the footage they had lost. So he...
It sounds like what they're saying
Yes.
Putin is doing.
Yes.
To get back. But go ahead.
Yeah, so this is the connection. There's the connection. All right, so there's been this balance of power, and so since Hitler lost, and Japan had lost, the United States tried to, the United States and the Allies had a division because Russia was not going along with this. So now there was another division between the so-called communist countries and the democratic countries. And the Union Socialist Social Republic, which was USSR, and the United States and the Allies were in a worldwide Cold War. But the Cold War is always a lapse between the Cold War. Is another hot war that follows the Cold War. And what we're seeing now is, with Russia having lost about 30 years ago its empire, they feel themselves to be surrounded by the Allies, and the balance of power is being destroyed. So if Ukraine were to join NATO, Russia sees that themselves being surrounded on the south and the west by the so-called Allies. And so this is Putin's attempt to reconstitute the old USSR, and that's what he's trying to do. So, and what the United States and the Allies are trying to do is is to keep Russia from reconstituting its empire, so to speak, and try to keep Russia from joining China in the alliance.
Okay.
So this is the focal point of what's happening in Ukraine. Now, there's another dynamic that's going on, because when you conquer people, you have a plan, and the plan's been for the past 1,000 years is you have a national objective, number one. You demonize the people that are in the way of your objective. You call them savages, terrorists, heathens. You demonize them. You label them. These are the enemy. All right, and then you have to find an incident to an excuse to attack them. It might be the Alamo.
Right,
It might be the World Trade Center. It might be the blowing up the Maine 1898, declaring the Spanish America. Whatever it's going to be a spark, an excuse.
Okay.
And then if you win, either by dividing the people among themselves or by outright conquest, you're going to write the history saying that what you did was to benefit the people that you conquered. You brought the Africans here to take them out of being cannibals. You brought, you civilized the Mexicans, or whatever it is that you, and under that rubric, my great grandfather was a lucky savage to be brought here as a slave, and so forth. So that's going on. But now, in terms of ruling in countries, you have economic ups and downs. What countries like Russia and China, the United States and Germany always do is to find someone to blame on that. And it's called scapegoating and demonizing people. And usually it's the immigrants who are doing well. In Germany, Hitler called it, in his Mein Kampf, he called it positive Christianity. He said that Jesus and Luke had gone into the synagogue and drove out the money changers. So he took that language and said, we have to drive the money changers out of Germany, and they're the Jews. They're the ones that are causing our suffering. Okay. And back before, they used to call it Judenstyle, getting rid of the Jewish pigs. So now, in China, I go to China to get to Africa.
Okay.
In China, you have the Uyghurs who have been there since 300 BC and migrated there. They're from an area where Russia meets Mongolia and China. They're from that area. They moved into China, and they're one of 55 minorities in China. So, they occupy a place, a rich place where resources are in northwest China. So now, in terms of people in that area not doing well, Chinese people, Han people not doing well, they're blaming the Uyghurs for this, and this is an excuse to oppress them. Now, this is not the first time that Muslims have been oppressed in China. The Muslims came to China in 681 AD after the Prophet had passed, and set up a lucrative trade in China. They set up a lucrative trading post. Okay. In fact, the Prophet said, go to China for learning.
Right.
So we went there.
That, right.
We set up an enclave. So in the year 760, by that time, there was a wealthy Muslim community in China, in Yaozhou province and Gaozhou province. So
you said it's the northern side of China?
no, the Uyghurs are northern side of China.
Okay, but there was another group.
There's another group near the Silk Road.
Okay.
That were Muslims. They're Arabs.
Okay.
So when things were going bad, this is the Tang Dynasty. When things were going, people were complaining Tang Dynasty about shortages of food and stuff like that. The Tangs started to blame the Muslims. And there was a rebel leader named Chang Hong who was going to revolt. He blamed the Muslims and the Christians that were there in China. So in that year, 760, they slaughtered 120,000 Muslims and Chinese.
Wow.
And then again in 878, there was another massacre of Muslims this time, just Muslims. They went door to door and were killing Muslims, and the only Muslims that were saved were the ones that were hidden by the Chinese under the bed, basically, so to speak.
Right.
So this
Underground Railroad.
Right. So this is not a new story. We've seen this movie before.
Oh, okay.
In China, oppressing minorities, in particular Muslims. Now, the Uyghurs are not particularly wealthy, but they're in a place in China that the Chinese would like to put Han people and replace the population with a group called the Hans. The Hans are the people who conquered China and set up these dynasties that became very famous. You know, but they drove out the Yi and the Wa people and many other minorities, 55 minorities that were there before. Some of them from Africa had been there for 30,000 years. They traveled to China, and they're still there. They wear their hair like dreadlocks and so forth.
Wow.
But the idea of taking a minority and using them as a scapegoat and oppressing them is not new. So it happened in China, and then in the Sudan, you go to China, you go to Africa now.
Right.
You find in the Sudan when the process of decolonization of Africa, there are 5,000 tribes in Africa, and some of them were at war with each other for many years, or enemies.
Right.
So what the British Empire did, and they did this very astutely throughout the world, they drew borders that included tribes who didn't get along with each other. Like in Nigeria, you had the Igbo, the Hausa, and the Yoruba.
Put them all together.
Put them all together, so when there's war, the British could always come back in as peacekeepers and say they would keep in peace.
Each other.
Right. So they did this with the Sudan. The southern tribes were mostly Christians, and the northern people were Muslims. In the south, you had the Nile River. The Nile River has a source in southern Sudan. It's a source of hydroelectricity. It has minerals like gold, silver, copper, tungsten, zinc. Precious metals that are used in an industrial country that's waking up out of agriculture. So that's what's in the south. That's not in the north. So in the north, the pressure of the south in Darfur is because they want to get those people off the land. They want to get the people off the land so they can get to those resources and control those resources. Especially the most important one is water, which is one of the sources of the Nile, and it runs right through the Sudan. So whoever controls that water controls hydroelectricity and so forth and so forth. But it was set up by the British so there would be conflict, and all of it in all of these places. You mentioned Myanmar, Myanmar. The Buddhist majority is the majority religion, and the military leaders, since they have subscribed to the philosophy that most military leaders do of controlling the resources for themselves privately, and the people are not fully invested in society, they blame the Muslims, people in Myanmar, for the troubles of the average poor citizen. You're not making money because of those Muslims.
That sounds familiar.
So it's the same pattern.
It's a consistency in terms of here in America, telling I would say the poor whites that when they lost their job, it was because of the African or the Mexican or someone which is playing out. I mean, so this formula has a long history throughout mankind of using this formula to create dissent, divide, and while those in control who creates this false scenario and market it or propagandize it and what have you on the people, believing that I don't have a job because a quote-unquote black man got the job.
Yeah, they're taking our jobs.
Yeah, or because there was some kind of affirmative action taken, so therefore they get educated, I'm not, and so forth and so on. When in fact that's not the actual truth of the matter, but it's a false narrative and a false picture that has been brought up into reality by marketing.
That's correct.
The technology now allows you to even faster seems to ignore the reality of something as being the truth of the matter and promote a falsehood, which we've seen in recent times with the previous president in terms of the media said they cannot keep up with the outright lies that the former president Donald Trump would put forth, and since they kept promoting it, it became no longer a lie but a fact of the matter, though everyone knows that what he was presenting was outright lies. And how we have a hard time now today in the world with all of these things going back to this same scenario with Russia and in Europe and the whole alliances and what have you, and then it seems like here's the common people, the norm people who just trying to work, make a living, and etc., are caught in this massive migration and things that they have to do because of the greed.
That's correct.
The greed of wanting to keep dominance over the people in every aspect, whether it be monetarily, whether it be because of oil and gas and etc. But what I'm seeing, being that we're looking through the eyes of Islam, the eyes of our holy book, the Quran, the revelation that God gave to the prophet, the prayers of people upon him, that as you went through that history from 600 so and so up into this current situation, that this is coming to a head, that these kind of strategies can no longer be fortified by falsehood, because the technology today allows it to be seen in real time, that you're saying you're not doing this, but we're looking at it.
Yes.
You know, kind of
Yes.
thing. You say this is not what you're using, but we're seeing it.
Right, you're not hitting civilian targets.
Right,
Yeah, right.
those kind of things. What have you?
Right.
Like before,
Yeah.
where you can put up a false picture, and even we know in recent times, in Afghanistan, in Libya, and in all these other places that they declared war for the same so-called purposes, to get the values of riches was out of there, use the misguidedness maybe of the leaders there and etc., and declare what they call it, missiles of mass destruction. And,
Weapons of mass
so,
destruction,
all
yes,
of these
yes,
things
yes.
here, and promote it on the people. And what they're doing right now, they say the gas prices and all this stuff is because of them, so therefore you should want to get with us to destroy them.
Yes.
This is something,
It's
but
diabolical.
what it is diabolical, and that's why we say, and God is not absent. And these kind of things in the time we're living in are revealed now, where they was able to be easily hidden before.
That's
you
correct.
know, even watching the Supreme Court and that nomination, and hear the illogical questions that make no sense to be asking a person potentially for the Supreme Court, except for your own grandizement, your own promotion of yourself, believing that you have enough control over media messaging and what have you, that the people you looking to quote unquote serve are so dumbed down to where they can't see through your schemes and what have you. But that's not true today, because there's so many things like we're using today, this mechanism to be able to communicate, and you don't find us being asked as an historian, as African Americans, and all of the different things we have achieved, and particularly us as Muslims of African American descent, the largest Muslim population in America, as one population, is the African American Muslim. Now, if you put all the other different Muslims together from different parts of the world, yes, they would be a different number. But we have a unique situation as being indigenous of America, and how Islam has come to us, that surely God was protecting us.
Yes.
So that, and we don't bring biases into the religion. We don't bring cultural dynamics that dominates. We have been made free from total enslavement by virtue of we got Islam pure, without any culture to bring with it, which we find part of the problem of the misconception of Islam is because folks present their culture as compared to the scripture itself, the revelation, the word of God, and the example of the prophet. They allow their culture to dominate it and say this is Islam. So they'll compromise with things that we know you can't compromise with. You can't compromise with a behavior that defies the very nature that God created the creation in. As I heard Imam Muhammad said one time, that you have black and blacker, you have white and whiter, and God says in our holy book that He created everything in pairs. So Imam Muhammad was pointing out there's no there's male, female, there's no neutral.
Right, there's no neutral gender.
Right, you know what I'm saying?
Right.
And here today, once again, under all these other things that are happening under this cover of darkness, putting in another situation to make it popular through every aspect and your TV, your commercials, and etc. You can't turn on anything with being shocked by you and your family watching. Here's a commercial and showing you something that you, in your position, saying, no, I don't want to accept this. But again, we've seen all these dynamics happening, and we have to pay attention to them. And from what our understanding is, they were prophesied that they would happen.
Yes.
That these things would happen, and it's going to be those who hold on to the facts and truth of the matter,
Right.
not my facts, not my truth, but the truth.
The truth.
The truth that is proven by science, by knowledge and etc., and historical facts, that then we have an opportunity to really move forward. So seeing all these things that are happening, as horrible as they are, and that horrible picture has been happening all the time. However, in their greed, they have intertwined with each other so much that now they're afraid to attack this because I'm going to lose out, because I need this gas and I need this oil and I need this wheat and etc.
Yes.
And that's that one global community
Yes.
that they try to avoid. But now all your riches is tied in with everybody else, with the common man.
We're at the same table.
Correct. You know what I'm saying? And this is what they're saying. They're attacking the what they call the oligarchy, the people who got all the money,
Autocrats.
autocrats and etc. Because now your money is all linked into where if you try to dominate, you can't, because it's tied into a global picture, which is what God, a world economy. So you got to think first now before you start attacking and doing things, and then look and say your gas price for gasoline now is $600 a gallon. You know, and then so you got to start cutting taxes off the thing, and so it's all unfolding right in front of our eyes that these folks who think they are the elite and they're thinking and etc. It really shows how dumb and stupid they are.
That's right.
You know, they shoot themselves in their own foot. But when you get greedy and you want dominance and etc., God says in our book, and it says in the book before, that those who will seek dominance on this earth will never be successful.
That's correct.
And I think that picture of a global community that God has let Russia in, said this is a global community, and you're all intertwined, and you all need one another. So you better think twice about going in there and slaughtering each other over something, because it's going to have a ripple effect on everything else.
I made you so you would know each other, not these despise
right.
each other.
There you go.
Isn't that God's command?
Yeah.
And he's making us know each other.
Yeah, right.
You know, we have to understand. Because you know, if you hold back something, you're hurting yourself.
Absolutely. Absolutely, you know, so that's a blessing. Any other last comments you may want to give us on something else that maybe we need to know about? I'm sure our audience would like to hear.
Well, you know, keep your eyes on the prize, as they say. And the eyes on the prize is the prize of truth, that God made this world. He's one God, and it's one creation, and we're one humanity. And we have to keep our eyes on the truth that we are made here to serve God as in the community, and not as individuals. This idea of rugged individualism destroys civilizations. We are a community. We have, like you said, we have to intertwine. We are interdependent with each other, and we're coming to the end of the day where the pendulum is the move of the pendulum is being seen. So the pendulum of history goes from right to left. They say, well, conservative, not enough law, we need law. Oh, we free the people. And it goes back and forth, and people are always moving back and forth between two extremes. But God talks about the balanced view. And a person with a balanced view has a balanced eyesight and balanced senses. And he can see when the emperor has no clothes, even though everyone else thinks the emperor has clothes on. So we're blessed to be in this time, and to have a show like you have to make us ponder and make us think. Thinking is a great, great thing. That's what makes us human.
Well, praise be to God. Well, Dr. Mannan, we appreciate you joining us today and look forward to you joining us again. And you, our audience, we pray to God that you have appreciated this interview with Dr. Majeed Mannan. And we pray that our efforts to just share from our perspective in terms of our life in Al-Islam as descendants from Africa and African Americans, and that all we ask you to do is, again, think about it. Thank you, Dr. Mannan.
Thank you.